Calls for a public inquiry into the deaths of Aboriginal women. Ottawa is resisting, but the provinces are looking to turn up the pressure. Also, remembering Tina Fontaine, the Manitoba teen whose death has sparked the latest push for a national inquiry. I'm Affan Chowdhry. Welcome to Globe Now. Tina Fontaine was a 15-year-old Manitoba teenager whose body was found August 17th in Winnipeg's Red River. Her death has renewed calls for a public inquiry to get to the bottom of more than 1,000 murders and disappearances of Aboriginal women since 1980. But Prime Minister Stephen Harper has said no to a public inquiry, arguing instead that the latest death is a crime and not a sociological phenomenon. Well, that has prompted strong criticism. And beginning this week, Canada's premiers are meeting, and one of the issues they'll tackle is that of a public inquiry. The Globe's Bill Curry has been reporting on the story, and he joins us from our Ottawa bureau. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Affan.
Now, this is not the first time provincial leaders have called for an inquiry. What makes this latest call different?
Well, right, as you mentioned, they did call for this when they met last summer. And what makes it so different this time is obviously everybody is focused on the story of Tina Fontaine. She was very young. The circumstances are so grim. And so it has really brought the issue to the forefront again, just as the First Ministers meet. And the interesting thing about a First Minister's meeting is it kicks off every year with the Premier's meeting with the national Aboriginal leaders. So that's going to happen on Wednesday. So that gives the Aboriginal leaders a national forum to really put this issue back on the national agenda.
And do we have a clear picture of what would be the framework of a public inquiry?
Well, the Native Women's Association has put out some suggestions because we have had a report that the Prime Minister has been pointing to that the RCMP did, and there's a lot of interesting statistics in there in terms of what's been happening over the last 30 years. But what the Native Women's Association says is you need an independent voice to look at how the police handle this, because anecdotally they hear a lot of concerns from people that some of their complaints aren't necessarily taken serious enough. When there's reports of missing women, maybe the police don't act fast enough. Mm-hmm. So they'd like those kind of questions examined. And we also have Saskatchewan Premier Brad Wall, who was telling the Globe and Mail this morning's paper that he would like to see, look at more of the systemic issues and the role of the federal government, provincial government, but also Aboriginal leaders and the First Nations communities, because the RCMP stats have shown that, a lot of the perpetrators of these murders are coming from the relatives and family members of the women themselves.
I mean, to what extent is the Prime Minister's position on a public inquiry a surprise?
It's not terribly surprising. In terms of his approach to Aboriginal issues, he's never been a big fan of the big meetings. When he came to power in 2006, he terminated what was the Kelowna process, which was this big year-and-a-half series of meetings that Prime Minister Paul Martin had brought in to look at all kinds of issues about Aboriginal policy. And Stephen Harper's preference has been to focus on smaller progress, smaller land claims, focus on the education aspect of it. But that ran into a big snag in the past few months, too, with the Assembly of First Nations rejecting the latest education reform bill.
So is there any chance that there could be a change of mind on this position with regards to a public inquiry?
I'd be very surprised if the Prime Minister changes his mind. However, some of his ministers are showing some openness to an idea that the Aboriginal leaders are floating as kind of something to do in the interim before getting an agreement on an inquiry. And that's the idea of having some kind of roundtable where the Aboriginal leaders, maybe the provinces, sit down with the responsible federal ministers and try to work out some policy approaches to these issues. So there might be some appetite, some movement on that front.
I mean, do the provinces even need Ottawa's approval to hold an inquiry of their own?
Not really. I mean, we see provinces have inquiries all the time. They could work together and have inquiries or one inquiry that they all fund. However, the PEI Premier, Mr. Giz, who is representing the Premiers, argues that it's the federal government who ultimately has the policy responsibility. They also have more fiscal flexibility than the provinces. And the Native Women's Association as well had said, while they used to think that might be a good idea, just have the provinces do it, they want Ottawa to be involved because otherwise they're concerned if Ottawa's not there, at the end of the day when there's recommendations from an inquiry, they'd be concerned that Ottawa would feel less obligated to act.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much, Bill.
Thanks, Affan.
Well, we want to hear from you. Does Canada need a public inquiry into the murders of Aboriginal women? Tweet us at Globe Now. Police are still investigating the death of Tina Fontaine. The details of how she died and under what circumstances are still unclear. But the lead investigator has said that she had definitely been exploited and taken advantage of. The Globe's Catherine Blaise Carlson sat down with Tina Fontaine's aunt, who cared for Tina for some 10 years. Here, she remembers her niece.
How does anybody say goodbye to a little girl? There's no way. I've seeked help from just about everybody I knew, like I could think of. She was having some problems, trying to deal with her issues with her dad. It was always about her dad, and that's like they were just slammed like in my face. Tina was missing like 2 weeks before I actually called, and I had to call them, and that's when they told me that she was missing. She was a happy little girl. She didn't deserve that. She was so tiny. I don't know who she would hurt for somebody to do that to her. Like she was garbage. Just thrown in the river. But I want to put her at rest. I don't want her to ever feel pain again. She went through enough by learning that her dad was dying of cancer, having her dad killed, having her mom turn her back on her, having the system fail her. Nobody's going to hurt her.